Hey everyone, today I would like to explain how we can use GitHub Workspaces for AWS projects. For that, let's first create a GitHub repo. Let's name it something like AWS projects, and there is just no description. I will make it a private and add a README so that I can update whenever I want. And I created the projects. And in order to access the workspace, all you have to do is go over here and create code space on the main. Once you click on it, it takes some time to build the workspace, and we can open the workspace in your browser. You can attach it to the VS Code. It got good number of options to access the workspace. Let's see, we can see it over here. Once it got activated, you can open in browser in VS Code and Jupyter Lab. As of now, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just making it in the browser, and it just comes with the readme, and mostly it doesn't have any applications or softwares installed in this workspace. In order to have whatever customizations you need for your workspace, we have to create a dev container. And I had a repo AWS examples, and we can create the code spaces. I already created a code space on my branch, so just simply clicking on it, it takes us to our particular code space. When you first open a code space, it doesn't have any dev container.json file, but this dev container.json file is where we make sure what exactly we need in our container is actually downloaded every time we rebuild our code space. Here I defined I want my code space to be on top of this image, and the main feature I really want in my code space is AWS CLI to interact with AWS. And also I downloaded these two extensions in the dev container.json. We can also go over here and try to install any of our needed extensions. But even if we do that, the next time we rebuild our code space, these extensions will be erased. We can see them. Yeah. So let's see if my AWS configuration is already valid. I used uh, environmental variables to do that, to set up my AWS credentials. Let's see the AWS version. Yeah, I had my AWS version, and I would like to see if the AWS S3 ls statement, which is to list all the buckets present in our S3 service, is active or not. AWS S3 ls, since there are no buckets in my account, I am assuming it's to be empty instead of giving an error. Yes, it is empty. If I created a bucket in my S3, then it's going to be it will list all the buckets that are present in my S3. Yeah, so let's create an user. Let's get into IAM, and now we can create a new user in order to have our I already created one user called CLI user, but in order to explain in this tutorial, I would like to create a new user. Let's name him tutorial user. Provide user access to AWS Management Console. I don't need user access to console. I need user access to the CLI. So let's come here, and I'm gonna give all the administrator access. Next, and then go to previous. I wanna check, is there anything we can add here? No. Next, we can add a tag if needed. Maybe we can add something. User group. Let's say CLI users. CLI users. Is there valid ones? I'm not sure, but okay, it came. Now we had new tutorial user. In order to create AWS credentials, we're gonna go into security credentials, and we have to create access keys. Create access keys. Why do you want to use the access keys? There are use cases. For us it's command line interface, but there are many other use cases you could choose, and there are few other alternatives recommended for AWS CLI. Any one of them we can choose. We can learn about them later. And let's go next. We can add any tag for these access keys, or you can just leave them alone. And these are our access keys. Anyhow, I'm going to delete them since they're exposed, but let's see how we can use these access keys in our workspace. Okay, restart our code space. These are our access keys. Let's see, we had our AWS CLI version installed. It's going to be there. Okay, let's try any of the AWS CLI commands. Since we haven't configured our credentials, we're gonna have an error. See, unable to locate our credentials. So in order to, we have to run AWS configure to configure our credentials. So it's gonna ask us our access key ID. Paste it here, and then we had our password and password, key ID, and access key. And the default region, we can use US East one, which is nearest to me. You can use any of the regions provided by AWS. And output format, mostly many people choose JSON. You can choose anything. And yeah, right now they are configured. Let's test. Give me C AWS S3 LS. So according to me, since my resources doesn't have any bucket, my S3 doesn't have any buckets in it, it is not going to list any of the S3 services. Yeah, I think it's working, but let's see if there is any other good command we can use. Okay, I think our let's use AWS configure again. So what happened? The JSON letters I gave is the wrong input for AWS, which says like unknown output type JSON. So what instead I did, I made it as a default output format. I think it's not working right now. Go to change default JSON default out. We should give in AWS. Oh, I think it should be small letters. Let's see, we can get the caller identity. Yes. So this is the user ID, account number, and the ARN. So we are successfully able to use AWS CLI and at the same time configure our access credentials for our user in the workspace. But what happens here is when you go to the command palette and rebuild the container, let's rebuild the container, we should not be able to access any of the AWS resources. So all the configuration you did for AWS keys will be vanished, because it's a container. So we should configure our AWS keys in a different way, and let's see how we're gonna do it. So after rebuilding, let's see if we are able to check if we still got AWS CLA version. We can have the AWS CLA version because when you rebuild, it rebuilds from this feature installing the AWS CLI. But we we won't be able to use our AWS S3 list command. See, you're having the same error, unable to locate credentials, because since the workspace got rebuilt, all the configuration you did earlier is vanished. In order to solve this problem, what we have to do, we have to go to our GitHub, into our repo, and here into the settings, you have to go into the code spaces. Here you have to create the repository secrets, which are environment secrets. New repository secrets. Oh, here you will take the AWS access key ID. This is the variable name that AWS provides, and we will paste our access key ID and add the secret. And the again you go to the new repository secret, and you're gonna copy your actual key and add the key into the code space secrets. Now these are the code space secrets added. Let's see, it is asking to reload. Let's reload to apply all the code space secrets we added into our repository. Since we added these AWS access key and access key ID as environment variables, no matter what, if you rebuild the workspace, we can still access those values. So you can automatically run your AWS commands, AWS CLI commands like AWS S3 ls and AWS STS caller get identity. It got the ls. See, we don't see any error. We can get our identity. So now let's rebuild again and see if we can access our AWS services and resources through AWS CLI. This time we can do that because instead of just configuring AWS credentials, we made them as environmental variables in our GitHub environment secrets. AWS, yes, git caller identity. See, we can do that. So this is how you're gonna configure your AWS credentials in GitHub workspaces, so that even if you rebuild your workspace, we are not going to lose our access keys. See you again with the new cloud concepts. Thank you so much.